Let's turn our attention now to the international newspapers. Diptyque Laurent is with us for that. Diptyque, this time we're going to start here in France, and there's a scandal over Afghan interpreters employed by the French army.
That's right. This is a scandal. It's not new. It's been continuing on for some time. La Croix newspaper, the Catholic paper, is looking at this on its front page today. Civilians, lots of them, who were hired to work for the French army upon the promise of getting a visa to France. This was between 2001 and 2014. They were left to fend for themselves when they saw their visas refused by French authorities and really forced to stay at home. They were considered traitors in their home country. One interpreter was forced to go into hiding. His brother was killed by the Taliban, and his family have to move house every time they are threatened. In fact, there's a book that comes out today looking at this scandal. Those who made it to France only made it thanks to the help and pressure from rights groups. The book today detailing a system of sabotage of visa requests by the government, the interior and foreign ministries, also the army, a network, really, a deliberate attempt to stop these visas from going through. It actually came to a head last week when the government's governing body ruled that any civilian, foreign civilian working for the army has the right to seek refuge in France if their life is threatened back home.
Okay, well, from one scandal, Diptyque, to another, Costa Rica now, the former president there and a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, is facing accusations of sexual assault.
Yeah, that man is Oscar Arias Sanchez, the former president of Costa Rica and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. He's been accused of sexual assault by a psychiatrist and anti-nuclear activist. The events dating back to 4 years ago, according to the New York Times. Alexandra Arch van Herald, she is an anti-nuclear activist. She met regularly with Arias Sanchez, who was a supporter of her cause. She accuses him of sexually assaulting her at his home in 2014. Dr. Arch says that the Me Too movement, in particular, witnessing the young gymnast who testified against her, Dr. Larry Nassar, really inspired her to come forward with her own events. The Washington Post actually reporting now that another woman, a journalist from Human Rights Watch, has also accused him of sexual assault, although formal charges have not yet been laid.
However, Arias Sanchez, a very powerful man in the region.
And this is why it's important, Yves, as this Costa Rican paper, Tico Times, explains, he's not just the former president of Costa Rica, he's a Nobel Peace Prize laureate for his efforts in trying to end Central American civil wars in the 1980s. He was born into an upper-class family. He's well-educated. These allegations will indeed test the strength of sexual assault cases against powerful men in Latin America. Arias Sanchez, for his part, has denied the claims.
Well, let's turn now to some reactions. I imagine there's quite a flurry of them. Reactions to Donald Trump's State of the Union address.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of interesting editorials coming out. Let's start with the New York Times. Editors there call it a message of unity from an agent of discord. I quite like that headline. I quote, a soothing message that was wholly at odds with the acrid reality of how Donald Trump has governed. Perhaps best encompassed in this cartoon from Jack Oman, for whom it's not so much a State of the Union, but Donald Trump's statements of the Union. Here he is calling for national unity, not an easy feat when he's insulted pretty much every major politician in the U.S. You see a whole list of names. He's called several people Crooked Hillary and Lying Ted among that long list of insults.
The Washington Post has also had a pretty negative reaction to the speech.
That's right. The Post editors have said that his speech, quote, reflected endurance, if not eloquence, but they deplore the fact that Donald Trump offered a, quote, thin sheen of unity over large helpings of the same old polarizing demagoguery. That's, I'm quoting there from the Post. Tuesday's speech, if anything, reinforced the need for Congress to reclaim its prerogative on issues like trade, foreign policy, and other key issues. This from an impetuous, drifting president, I quote. I quite like the Ezra Klein's analysis in Vox. He pens an interesting article basically saying, you know, I actually liked parts of Donald Trump's speech and then contradicting it with the reality. So, for instance, he liked Donald Trump's message of rejecting revenge politics. Then he says, I remembered that Donald Trump triggered the shutdown so he wouldn't have to negotiate with the Democrats over his border wall funding. Trump's speech, Ezra Klein says, was more about him imagining himself to be the president that he simply is not.
Okay, finally, Diptyque, something very different. It's in the Guardian newspaper, a story about a man in Mumbai who's suing his parents for giving birth to him.
Yeah, who would have thought this? Raphael Samuel, that's his name. He's a 27-year-old Mumbai man, a so-called antinatalist. He's very much alive, The Guardian says, but clearly regrets it, so much so that he's taking his parents to court for giving birth to him without his consent. Antinatalist is actually a movement. They say it's morally wrong for people to procreate and that a vast amount of human misery could be avoided if people simply weren't born or don't exist. He admits that he has a great relationship with his parents, but that he was born for their joy and not his. Not sure if he's aware that fetal consent is not really a thing.
Would be hard to get that consent before it, but there's some maybe interesting debates to be had on that issue. Diptyque Laurent, thanks a lot for that wrap up with the international press.